Let's bring in the New South Wales Police Minister, David Elliott, who joins us from Sydney today. Thanks for joining us, David. Happy Australia Day. Tell us your assessment of the stresses and strains on police around your state today.
Well, it's unfortunate that we do have to deploy extra resources because people want to do the wrong thing. This was a unique Australia Day. A lot of those community gatherings had to be suspended until next year, and police have been had a very, very busy day. Of course, there was the rally in the city, and I've just been briefed only a couple of moments ago about police having to be redeployed down to Lilli Pilli, where a whole bunch of people decided they wanted to have a beach party, and at the moment that's being dispersed as well. So it's as far as behaviour is concerned, we've got no real criticisms. Most people wanted to do the right thing, and most people have complied with the public health orders. But of course, there's always going to be one or two that think that they're above the law.
Let's start off with the protests. The protests were legal, and in the main, people were able to be socially distanced. It's a stinking hot sunny day in Sydney anyway. But so the arrests were made. Were they made for behaviour, disorderly behaviour, or because of breaking pandemic rules?
A few. There are only about 5 arrests at the protest today in the city, which is very good, and it's a credit to Assistant Commissioner Mick Willing, who's the police commander, forward commander, has to manage these operations. Very, very conscious of the fact that the tone and the mood and the tempo of the activities of the day can change swiftly. But police did the right thing. They used some discretion where required. They made arrangements with the protesters for them not to march, and they dispersed the crowd very, very quickly. There were, of course, as I said, about 5 people that wanted to do the wrong thing. Some people were given infringement notices for breaching the public health orders, others for resisting police and getting in the way of the police operations. But all in all, very happy with the way that the police managed the operation in the city today. But as I said, that only meant that they had to be redeployed down to the southern shire of Sydney, where people wanted to do the wrong thing again, despite all the warnings.
Well, tell us about that, because the beaches were packed all day. Stinking hot day. I tried to get to the beach at 7:30 and gave up. So there were rules. People weren't supposed to be in groups. But just explain to us what they weren't allowed to do and what was wrong with this beach party that you've had to break up this afternoon.
Well, the beach party this afternoon was clearly in breach of what we believe to be reasonable numbers on the foreshore. But all the beaches across the state, particularly metropolitan Sydney, in consultation with councils and Surf Lifesaving, there is a deemed figure of what would be acceptable so far as the social distancing obligations are concerned, and when those obligations are met, when those numbers come to fruition, well then it's up to the council to close the beach, and if they can't do that, will police get involved as well. So all in all, that's gone pretty well. I think it was even very, very hot for a lot of beachgoers today, so that probably kept some of the crowds away. Others, of course, would have decided to just sit this one out. There were a number of smaller, low-key activities, and of course, nothing beats a sprinkle in the backyard.
Indeed. Now, your government, led by Gladys Berejiklian, has led the country in trying to be sensible about our COVID response, dealing with most of the overseas returnees, keeping borders open, not locking down cities and states, a really sensible approach, and trying to keep state borders open and lobbying other states about that. So how disappointed are you that the federal government would close off this one-way Anzac travel bubble on the basis of just one infection?
Well, listen, there is no rule book for this, Chris, and I give full marks to Scott Morrison. He has probably led the world's best practice when it comes to a Commonwealth or a federal or a national government. I for the life of me, can't see a country anywhere else in the world that's doing it better than Australia. But I do appreciate the fact that when it comes to the international borders, it's much, much harder for us to manage. It's a little bit easier to manage the state borders. It's a little bit easier to contact trace them. It's a little bit easier to monitor where vehicles are using, obviously, registration the technology police have to monitor registration numbers, but it is just a little bit more difficult when it comes to international travellers. So I want to see the New Zealand bubble opened more than anybody. I mean, I've got friends and family over there. I've got some close friends at the moment going through a fair bit of trauma over a loved one who's just passed away over there. So these are issues not just for the rank and file of Australian society. I mean, these are issues that everybody's got to deal with, whether you're the Prime Minister or whether you're the local school teacher. I mean, these are matters that Scott Morrison keeps at the front of his mind whenever these decisions are made.
David Elliott, thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
David Elliott is the Police Minister in New South Wales, and let me take the opportunity to thank police officers, AMBOs, nurses, doctors, rural fire people who've been on standby. All those people are around this great country on Australia Day who have been doing that, helping out their fellow Australians by fulfilling those duties.